Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about how to sideboard with Pauper Kuldotha Burn, which is one of the best decks in Pauper. We're going to be looking at the top 10 most popular decks according to MTG Goldfish in Pauper, how I sideboard against each one of those decks with Kuldotha Burn, and analyzing what these sideboard cards are for. Let's look at it. First off, if you want a deck tech about this deck, I posted a deck tech on the channel. You should check that out on my channel. We went over every single card and how the deck works and all that stuff. So we're going to skip that in the sideboard guide. And before I really get into how to sideboard with Kuldotha Burn, I want to say sideboarding with this deck is both extremely easy and extremely hard. It's really hard because you need to realize something that's important, that an aggro deck like this is sort of like a combo deck. So against most matchups, unless you really, really need the cards, you don't actually want to sideboard that much because you want the deck to be able to just do its thing and be on its own. And so keep that in mind as we learn how to sideboard against these decks. And really in these hyper-aggressive synergistic aggro decks, we need to keep that in mind in every format. But anyway, the most popular deck in Pauper is the Burn deck, is the Mirror Match. And the only card in this whole deck that is good against Burn is End the Festivities, basically for enemy Kuldotha Rebirths, and pretty good against Volder and Epicure as well. In this matchup, we're trying to kill our opponents as fast as possible. Lava Dart doesn't really do anything because it doesn't actually kill anything besides 1/1s. And speaking of, Volder and Epicure is one of the worst cards in our deck, so we're going to be siding it out pretty often compared to other cards. And so we're going to shave Volder and Epicure, especially since we know that they're bringing in End the Festivities as well. And that's how we sideboard against Burn. The second most popular deck in Pauper is Grixis Affinity, which is kind of the decided upon best deck, I guess you would say. So weirdly enough, I think the only cards that are good against Grixis Affinity is Mind Collapse. And the reason we want to play Mind Collapse is because the only way that they're able to really beat us is to race us. And the only way they can really race us is with Mirror Enforcer. And so if we can keep up our aggro and be able to kill Mirror Enforcer for essentially free by sacrificing a land, that's where we want to be in this matchup. That being said, and I feel like this is going to become a trend, we are shaving 2 Lava Dart because this doesn't actually kill anything. And that's how we sideboard against Grixis. The third most popular deck is Mono Blue Fairies, which is a counterspell tempo deck. Obviously, of Mono Blue decks, Red Elemental Blast is just insane, and End the Festivities is just insane because it actually kills a ridiculous amount of creatures in our opponent's deck, because most of the fairies and really every creature except for Ninja of the Deep Hours and Brinebearer Intruder are X1s. Now, drawing cards and being efficient with our mana is going to be extremely important here, and really we're just trying to outcard them, so we don't want to side out any of our card advantage cards. So we're going to side out the weakest of the other cards in our deck, which is Volder and Epicure. Obviously, we've already talked about that. We're going to keep Lava Dart in, though, because we can kind of control their creatures with Lava Dart. I don't actually like Fire Blast in this matchup, because when you just go for the kill with Fire Blast, and then it gets Counterspelled or Spell Pierced or something like that, it feels super, super bad. And I actually like shaving 2 of the Goblin Blast Runners, because while the blockers are really important, we are just going to be blocking with Kuldotha Rebirth and just going to be attacking as hard as we can. And it's more about outcarding them and controlling their board. And I think that's the next weakest card, because if you're not spending the extra mana, it's just a 1/2, and I don't want to live with that. So this is how I sideboard against Mono Blue. The fourth most popular deck is Dimir Control, or I call it Dimir Tempo. Obviously, we're going to be bringing in Red Elemental Blast because they're playing a ton of blue cards that are very, very strong against. And we're going to be bringing in Relic of Progenitus. The reason we're bringing in Relic of Progenitus is because if we're able to control their graveyard, they are never able to cast their 5/5s, the 1-mana 5/5s in Gourmet Gangler and Tolarian Terror. That being said, Lava Dart is real bad because it just doesn't kill anything. And we are cutting the Volder and Epicures because it's just the weakest card in our deck, and we want to be doing this other stuff. That's how we sideboard against Dimir Control. The fifth most popular deck is actually my favorite deck, is Orzhov Ephemerate. Against Orzhov Ephemerate, Raze is actually pretty good. They don't run a lot of black lands, and so being able to destroy the black lands feels really good. And then also being able to just take out Orzhov Basilica when they have hands like that is really disgusting. And that's really it that we have for this deck. I like keeping in Lava Dart, and nothing else here is bad, so we're just going to shave 2 Volder and Epicure and bring in Raze, and that's what we're going to do. This is how we sideboard against Black-White Ephemerate. The sixth most popular deck is, I actually don't know the actual name of the deck. I hate how it's labeled on Goldfish as familiars, but it's the Muldiffer, Ghostly Flicker, Archaeomancer combo deck. We are bringing Red Elemental Blast, obviously. I'm a fan of Mind Collapse, so they can't cast their spells for way cheaper. And that is really it. Lava Dart doesn't actually kill any creatures, and Volder and Epicure is our next weakest card. So that's how we sideboard against that combo deck. The seventh most popular deck is this deck's kind of cousin in Boros Synthesizer, where they're kind of a Boros Kuldotha Rebirth deck. And weirdly enough, there's not a lot of cards on our board that we really want, and the Festivities only beats Kuldotha Rebirth, and that's not really where I want to be with this deck. However, we do have cards in our main deck that are just bad. Lava Dart is just bad against this deck. It can hit a Kuldotha Rebirth token. Like, the best way Lava Dart is just, like, the synergy in our deck in, like, triggering Goblin Blast Runner. I'd rather play cards that actually do stuff. I'm a fan of Mind Collapse. Mind Collapse is fine because it can kill the things with big butts, like Core Skyfisher, Thraben Inspector, and Glinthawk, so we can attack through much easier. But that's really it. But that's why we're going to do Sideboard against Boros Synthesizer. The 8th most popular deck is the Gruul Ponza Gruul Initiative deck, which is another deck that I am extremely fond of. Against this deck, we are definitely bringing in Mind Collapse so we can get rid of the huge creatures in the deck. And that is the only card that is actually good against them. Lava Dart makes the cut here because it kills Arbor Elf, and of course the normal synergies with the deck. So we're going to shave 2 Voldaren Epicures, and man, we're going to hope it's good enough. I really like this Gruul Ponza deck. The 9th most popular deck is Kogate, and there's a lot of cards that are actually pretty good against Kogate. I'm a fan of End the Festivities because it kills Sacred Cat and Squadron Hawk, which can often make them block for what feels like forever. I'm a fan of Raise because it can take out their gates, which, you know, they often become color intensive when they're like splashing for red and stuff, especially taking out Citadel gates so they can't pump up a Sacred Cat and just kill us, which is often what happens. And I'm also a fan of Red Elemental Blast because they play a bunch of boost spells that we actually care about in blue permanents like Counterspell and stuff. And we have to play Flaring Pain. That's really why we have Flaring Pain in our sideboard, mostly for Prismatic Strands, which is very good against us. So I like Lava Dart in the deck because when they go to like pump up Sacred Cat, we can just like interrupt it. So we're going to cut the Voldaren Epicures. I'm not a fan of Goblin Blast Runner in the deck because like they often just counter stuff and just can keep us off triggering Goblin Blast Runner, which is just awful. I'm not a fan of Fire Blast because they can just counter it when we like actually go for it. And I like Implement of Combustion because, again, we can treat it kind of like Lava Dart. So we're going to shave 2 of the Experimental Synthesizers. This is the one matchup where we need a bunch of cards because the deck is kind of built to beat us. Oh, God, I killed it. Oh, no. There we go. We fixed it. That's how I sideboard against Kogate. And the 10th most popular deck is Ephemerate Tron. It's a Tron deck, so obviously Raise is very, very good against them. They play a lot of blue spells that we care about, so Red Elemental Blast is good against them. They play Moment's Peace, so Flaring Pain is good against them. And that is pretty much it. Lava Dart does nothing, so we're siding out of Lava Dart. But I like a lot of the rest of these cards, so we're just going to go power level. So we're going to cut the Voldaren Epicures, and we're going to cut 2 of the Goblin Blast Runners, because again, it's pretty easy for the deck to keep us off comboing with Goblin Blast Runner. So this is how I sideboard against Ephemerate Tron. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this video was helpful in how to sideboard with Burn against the top 10 most popular decks in Pauper. If you're playing this deck, then I hope you have fun. This deck is a blast to play. Just destroys opponents super quickly and is very strong because the Pauper decks aren't really built to deal with this. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description, especially on Twitch where I stream most nights. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.